The outbreak and incident which occurred in Raccoon City is a key one within the Resident Evil franchise. An incident which, if you are looking at its origins, stretches all the way back through the games Resident Evil 0, Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 3 and even Resident Evil 5. In this video we'll be examining what happens in the lead up to this catastrophic event. You ready? Let's dive in. First, we need to go all the way back to the Neolithic, which is basically a section of time during the Stone Age. A tribe known as the S.T.A.R.S tribe from West Africa discovered a plant located in a cavern which contained an RNA virus known as the progenitor virus. Exposure to this plant and its virus killed many people, but one man survived, mutated, and developed superhuman abilities as a result. Eventually, the S.T.A.R.S tribe would live under the rule of this mutated king, who lived for centuries. The S.T.A.R.S built an underground city in the cavern using reflective construction techniques to allow the sun to reach the city. Does this sound familiar? It's the city in which Chris Redfield and Sheva Alomar stumble across in the mission in West Africa in Resident Evil 5. Anyway, let's fast forward to the 1960s. Knowledge of this virus was discovered by a British explorer named Henry Travis during a 34-year expedition through Africa. His findings attracted the attention of a paleovirologist named Dr. James Marcus, and in 1966, Marcus, British billionaire Oswald Earl Spencer and Dr. Brandon Bailey found the underground city and the plants and managed to isolate the virus. In February of 1967, Dr. James Marcus was ousted from the university in which he was conducting research, and all funding of his projects was stopped. Oswald Earl Spencer chose to fund further research and employed Dr. Marcus to work in a lab that he was planning to build. In March 1967, Umbrella Pharmaceuticals was birthed. Umbrella, being known as a pharma company, was a perfect cover for the shady operations which would follow over the coming years. An Umbrella executive training school was also built, which housed an underground lab in which Dr. Marcus would continue his research. This training school would recruit child prodigies with promising grades and brainwash and indoctrinate them in order for them to advance Umbrella's bio-research. Development of the virus within a lab setting proved difficult, however, as the Sontrape flower in which the virus was located grew under specific conditions only produced by the caverns in West Africa. To combat this, the following year a lab was set up in the caverns to get samples of the virus and transport those samples to other labs across the world, allowing for further testing. This gave birth to the T-Virus project. A breakthrough was found in 1977 when Dr. Marcus altered the T-Virus with leech genes. However, in 1978 the university was shut down by Earl Spencer, and two of Dr. Marcus's star pupils stole his research under the orders of Earl Spencer. The names of these two pupils may be familiar: Albert Wesker and Dr. William Birkin. These two were given senior research roles at the Mansion Lab as reward for their roles in stealing the research. Birkin and Wesker continued their work and combined the virus with genes from the Ebola virus. The purpose for this was that they would reduce the rate of mortality of the virus. Over the next few years, the virus was manipulated in order to create mutants whose brains would be able to take commands. The Arklay lab was able to make a breakthrough with a strain of virus called the Epsilon strain, which allowed for mutations in human beings which were beneficial for creating genes such as increased strength. But this also had a negative effect, being that intelligence would be reduced in the subject. In the late 1980s, Oswald Spencer realised that Dr. Marcus was planning to continue his research to present to the Umbrella board, which he hoped would culminate in him taking control of the company. Spencer ordered him eliminated, and a team of Umbrella security forces took him out. Dr. Wesker and Dr. Birkin accompanied them and gathered any data which could be used for their own research projects. Marcus's body and his leeches were dumped into the river, which caused the leeches to enter Marcus's body and fuse with his DNA, also absorbing his brain cells to inherit his memories. This created an entity, also known as Queen Leech, which would go on to avenge Marcus's death years later by going on a spree in 1998. Revenge against Umbrella was its primary motive. This spree started at the Arklay laboratories, where the lab staff would be contaminated and release Cerberus dogs from their cages. This, as a result, gave rise to animal attacks in the Arklay Mountains and also zombie attacks too. The mountains were shut to the public, and a tactical unit called S.T.A.R.S were called in to investigate. The S.T.A.R.S Bravo team is attacked and their chopper goes down. A S.T.A.R.S member called Rebecca Chambers stumbles across a train which was attacked by Marcus's leeches. Zombies inhabit the train. Rebecca teams up with a man named Billy Cohen. The train ends up at the school used by Umbrella in the 1970s to educate trainees. Birkin ends up destroying the school using its self-destruct feature in order to destroy any evidence of what they created there. Rebecca and Billy make it out alive. In the events that follow, Alpha Team, comprising of Jill Valentine, Chris Redfield, Barry Burton and Albert Wesker, are sent in to discover what happened to Bravo Team. Ambushed by Cerberus dogs, the Alpha Team is chased and forced to retreat to a nearby mansion. This is the mansion which Oswell L. Spencer had built in the late 1960s. Jill and Barry make it to the secret underground lab and come across Wesker, who reveals that Umbrella's intention was to eliminate S.T.A.R.S by Wesker luring them to the mansion, and the S.T.A.R.S team members would be used as test subjects. Wesker mentions that he's going to destroy the lab and the mansion to cover everything up. He also mentions that the real reason he is there is to retrieve bioweapons research. Combat data. Umbrella wanted to see how well their new BOWs behaved in combat. Wesker reveals that he was going to betray Umbrella and sell the data to a rival. Wesker's plan was to dispose of the S.T.A.R.S members, so he unleashes a new variant called the Tyrant, who attacks Wesker. He kills him, however, Wesker injected himself with a mutant T-virus strain beforehand, wakes up and escapes, faking his own death, but that's for another video. The Tyrant is eventually defeated, and Brad Vickers picks up the remaining Alpha Team members in his chopper, allowing them all to escape. Upon returning to the RPD, the S.T.A.R.S members, Jill, Chris, Brad, Barry, and of course, Rebecca Chambers, demanded a full investigation into the activities of Umbrella. This demand was rejected by Brian Irons, the Chief of Police in Raccoon City. It turns out that Umbrella had managed to bribe Chief Irons years earlier into keeping any investigations away from Umbrella's activities, leading to him disbanding S.T.A.R.S, and he ordered the RPD to investigate Umbrella instead. Irons hid behind the fact that S.T.A.R.S had lost too many officers, so couldn't function in its duties. Chris Redfield reported Irons to the FBI on suspicions of corruption, and they themselves began an investigation into corruption in the RPD. Due to the lack of willingness from Irons to get involved, Jill and Brad stayed in the city to try and find information on Umbrella's apparent new G-virus in their Nest facility in Raccoon City, and Chris went to Europe to investigate Umbrella, pretending that he was going on holiday. Jill's investigation was halted when Irons suspended her and put her under home lockdown, with her apartment under surveillance. 2 months after the incident at the mansion, this is where it all kicks off, so strap yourselves in. Remember William Birkin, Wesker's sidekick and the child prodigy trained by Umbrella? Whilst Wesker was luring the S.T.A.R.S members to the mansion back in July, Birkin was planning to betray Umbrella too, but his plan was to be embedded within the company and betray them from the inside. He was at the Nest facility, continuing his work on the T-virus alongside his wife Annette and the new G-virus, also called Golgotha, the latter of which he planned to sell to the US government in exchange for the US government to give him and his family asylum. In September 1998, Birkin initiated the last stage of his plan by dumping failed T-virus test subjects into a facility designed for the processing of contaminated waste. He then purposely flooded it, rendering it useless. The staff in the facility had been given antiviral medication to help them fight infection, but the virus was able to mutate and infect the staff. As a result, the T-virus made its way around Raccoon City at an alarming rate and reached the water treatment plant, causing the hospital to be overwhelmed with people suffering from a cannibal disease. Birkin's actions put him under suspicion from Umbrella, who feared that the G-virus wouldn't be handed over to them on completion. The G-virus was eventually completed, and as per Birkin's plan, the US military sent out a team to meet with Birkin and retrieve the virus. However, Umbrella's reach was far and wide, and they had moles within the US military, and Umbrella sent a team of USS Umbrella Security Service soldiers out to contain the virus before the US military could get there. Birkin was confronted but shot by a USS officer, and the team retrieved the T and G virus samples. With Birkin laying there close to death, he injected himself with a G virus sample that the team overlooked. He did this with the intent to make himself stronger, however the virus did not stabilise in his body and he instead turned into a mutant. He hunted the USS team through the labs and sewers and killed them all. The briefcase containing the virus sample was destroyed and the vials inside were also destroyed. Rats drank the samples and escaped into the sewers, which made an already fragile situation even worse. The rats left the sewers and ended up in the city and in the city reservoir. At this point, Umbrella were made aware of the issue and alerted Mayor Michael Warren, who fled the city, and Chief Irons, who did his best to sabotage RPD operations by sealing off escape routes and clearing out weapons lockers. The rate of infection in Raccoon City spiraled out of control, and tens of thousands of people were being infected. The city became more and more violent. The Pentagon, in an attempt to cover up the outbreak, told the media that they were investigating radioactivity in Raccoon City. Civilians were evacuated by chopper from the city zoo to be transported to a quarantine zone, checking for signs of infection. One of these choppers crashed when civilians turned into zombies. The National Guard was brought in to assist with the evacuation, as well as the US Army. They set up roadblocks to ensure no one could escape the city without being transported to the quarantine. The hospital stopped functioning due to crowds of people being admitted and the doctors and nurses being infected and turning into zombies themselves. 8:07 PM, 28th of September 1998. With Jill Valentine still at her apartment thinking she's under lockdown, she receives a call from Brad Vickers stating that she has to leave. As she's about to grab her things, a bioweapon called Nemesis bursts through the wall, growling the word S.T.A.R.S. After Jill escapes, Brad reveals to her that it only seems to be interested in hunting him and her. Upon escaping, Brad is bitten and infected by assisting Jill in running away from a group of zombies. Jill again is pursued by Nemesis and meets up with the UBCS, which is Umbrella Biohazard Counterterrorism Service. From a conversation with a soldier named Carlos, it's clear that this squad of mercenaries have no clue what Umbrella really has sent them there for the combat data, to test the BOW's effectiveness against the UBCS. This data was observed and recorded by a person called a monitor. Now, the monitor responsible for assembling and collecting this data was a UBCS soldier named Nikolai Zinoviev. We find out that an entire platoon of UBCS soldiers was decimated by zombies after they were locked in a room by Nikolai. Jill reluctantly agrees to help them get the power on so they can transport survivors out of the city via train to a clock tower on the edge of town. After getting the train running, Nemesis shows up, killing all the survivors, and Nikolai locks Jill and the platoon leader Mikhail Victor in their carriage with Nemesis. Mikhail sacrifices himself by detonating an explosive, but the train derails, knocking Jill unconscious. During this time, Carlos and another UBCS soldier, Tyrell, arrives at the RPD to evacuate a doctor who worked at the hospital, but he was also a scientist working for Umbrella at Nest named Nathaniel Bard, whose research for a vaccine could save Raccoon City. But Dr. Bard isn't there, he's still at the hospital, and on a video call orders the two soldiers to come get him. Carlos makes his way to the hospital but receives a call from Jill, who tells him what happened. Jill fights with Nemesis again, but Nemesis infects Jill, making her pass out. At this point, a man by the name of Leon Kennedy arrives in Raccoon City. He was due to start his job at the RPD as a rookie officer, but was warned to stay away. Curious and eager to help, he arrives at a petrol station to find an officer being attacked by a zombie. After barely escaping, he ends up meeting Claire Redfield, sister of Chris Redfield, who is going to Raccoon City looking for her brother, and they both make their way to the city. After a crash and an explosion, Leon and Claire are separated, and Leon makes his way to the RPD where he meets the severely injured Marvin Branner. Branner tells him there's an underground escape route through a secret passageway behind a statue. There are a couple of cool crossovers at this point, as we get to witness a zombified Brad Vickers bite Marvin Branner, explaining his injuries, and how the two officers died in the hallway. Anyway, a bit later on in the story, Leon encounters a mysterious woman named Ada Wong who claims she is FBI. He doesn't give him much information about what's going on and then disappears. But he then meets a man in the cells underneath the RPD called Ben Bertolucci, who tells him he has proof on a voice recorder about Chief Irons being bribed by Umbrella to keep their operation a secret. Ada mentions there's a vial of the G-virus in the Nest facility, but they need to get to the sewers to reach it. After fighting Birkin at various stages of his mutation, Leon gets the G-virus sample, but after making his way back to Ada, she pulls a gun on him and demands he hand over the virus sample. But Wong is shot by Annette Birkin and falls to her death, with the sample being destroyed too. And spoiler alert, Ada survives. As a result of the virus being removed, the Nest facility initiates a self-destruct sequence. Leon meets with Claire and the Birkin's daughter Sherry. Again, this is another story arc that I won't go into in this video, and they board a train, escaping Nest, but not before fighting a final battle with a mutated G. After defeating the mutated G, Leon, Claire and Sherry walk away from Raccoon City. Now, shortly after this event, Carlos finds Jill, still unconscious and infected by Nemesis. He takes her to the abandoned hospital, which conveniently happens to be right next door. He needs to find Dr. Bard as per his mission, and also to get a vaccine from Dr. Bard to save Jill. He makes it to Dr. Bard, but he's been executed by, guess who? Yep, Nikolai. Carlos finds a note from a US senator inviting Bard to a meeting to discuss the time the outbreak first started, to discuss the quarantining process. This was to discuss the setup of a special medical zone. Also found on the computer is info which states that Bard, upon hearing of the contamination of the water supply, ordered mass production of the vaccine. To do this, Bard needed more test subjects. In the hospital, Carlos finds notes from staff mentioning that they've seen patients being taken to a secret part of the hospital, which explains where Bard was getting his test subjects from. Bard also tried to secure his evacuation by telling the US senator mentioned earlier that he has saved a vaccine for him, But this obviously didn't work, hence why he contacted the RPD and spoke to Carlos and Tyrell. Carlos gets the vaccine and gives it to Jill. Tyrell arrives wounded and turns on the TV, which states that the outbreak is uncontainable, and on the 1st of October, Raccoon City will be destroyed by a missile strike. Jill, upon waking up at midnight on the 1st of October, learns of the missile strike that's happening in a few hours. Tyrell informs Jill that Carlos has gone underground, as Bard has stockpiled the vaccine. Jill makes it to the underground facility and creates a vaccine, but after encountering Nemesis again, the vaccine is dropped and stolen by Nikolai, who confirms that he's selling the data to Umbrella. Jill again has to battle Nemesis, and Carlos goes over the vaccine and Nikolai. After catching up with him, Carlos has been incapacitated by Nikolai, who destroys the vaccine in front of Jill. He reveals that he isn't working solely for Umbrella, that there's a second client who has ordered him to reduce Umbrella to rubble. Jill shoots Nikolai and demands to know who Nikolai is working for, but he refuses to tell her unless they take him with them. Jill refuses and says she'll find out on her own. Carlos and Jill escape Raccoon City in a helicopter, leaving Nikolai on the roof. As they escape, they witness the missile impact which destroys the entire city. And that's it for this one. Over the years, Umbrella would be involved in more atrocities over the world. More shady rivals would emerge in trying to create their own BOWs. Like I said, it's a story which stretches way back to the Neolithic period with the Endipaya tribe. But that's it for this one. If you did enjoy this video, please be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment down below on which games you think I should cover in the future. But for now, take care and I'll see you in the next one.